The air was thick with tension. Cameras flashed in rapid bursts, capturing every twitch of a brow, every whispered glance between rivals. The marble walls of the chamber seemed to lean in, amplifying the pressure of what was about to unfold. Every eye locked on Karoline Leavitt, her posture still, her expression unreadable, as if she carried centuries of silence in her chest. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett adjusted her papers with deliberate sharpness, a gesture meant to remind everyone in the room of her dominance. The stakes weren't just high, they were astronomical. An $80 million lawsuit hung like a storm cloud, threatening to shatter reputations and redraw the lines of political credibility. Reporters scribbled furiously, hungry for the headline that would crown a victor and expose a loser. For the crowd watching at home, it wasn't only about money. It was about identity, pride, and the question that always lingers beneath American politics. Who truly owns the narrative of power? Whispers rippled through the audience as Crockett leaned forward, her confidence radiating like fire. Yet the focus never drifted from Leavitt. She didn't fidget, didn't flinch. Instead, she let the weight of silence build, forcing even her fiercest critics to wait on her next breath. The hush was deafening, a collective pause suspended on the edge of history. And then, finally, she spoke. Measured, calm, but with a gravity that pulled the entire room into her orbit. What came out of her mouth wasn't a plea, nor was it an apology. It was something far sharper, something crafted not just for the person sitting across the table, but for the millions watching, waiting to see if dignity could still stand against arrogance. But what she said next, no one could have predicted. The lawsuit wasn't just a legal battle, it was a gauntlet thrown into the center of America's cultural and political crossroads. Jasmine Crockett's decision to pursue an $80 million claim sent shockwaves through both parties, igniting whispers that echoed across Washington, cable news, and living rooms nationwide. To her supporters, it was a daring move, a signal that arrogance would be punished, that no one, no matter how polished, was untouchable. To her critics, it was overreach, a gamble that smelled less of justice and more of spectacle. For Karoline Leavitt, the stakes were nothing short of survival. She wasn't just defending her bank account, she was defending her name, her credibility, and the very legitimacy of her voice in the American arena. In politics, perception is currency. Lose the crowd, and you lose everything. One misstep, one falter beneath the glare of those cameras, and her career could be reduced to rubble overnight. The lawsuit became a weapon, Crockett wielding it not just to win in court, but to dominate in the court of public opinion. And yet, beyond the paperwork, beyond the combative press releases, this confrontation carried the weight of something far larger. It wasn't about dollars, it was about dignity. It wasn't about who had the sharper attorney, it was about whose story would define the moment. Crockett stood as the embodiment of bold defiance, her words cutting through debate halls like fire. Leavitt positioned herself as the quiet counterpoint, the calm in the storm, carrying the unspoken pride of those who had been underestimated and dismissed. Every headline, every push notification, every trending hashtag amplified the drama. Would Crockett's audacity crush her rival, or would Leavitt's composure transform pressure into power? America wasn't just watching, it was taking sides. To immigrant families, to first-generation dreamers, to the millions who fought to have their voices respected, the question was clear. If $80 million could be weaponized against someone like Leavitt, what did that say about the fairness of the system itself? The room trembled with anticipation, the audience sensing that this was no ordinary confrontation. It was a test of identity, power, and truth in America. And as Leavitt prepared her next move, the whisper spread like wildfire. What happened next would rewrite the political script. Jasmine Crockett was no stranger to the spotlight. From the very beginning of her career, she built a reputation as a fighter who never backed down, a voice that cut through the noise with sharp edges and unapologetic conviction. In the halls of Congress, in the arena of television debates, and on the front lines of political battles, Crockett embraced confrontation as both weapon and shield. She thrived on the clash, her fiery exchanges replayed across social media feeds, celebrated by allies who saw her as fearless and condemned by rivals who painted her as reckless. Her rise was meteoric because she embodied defiance in a system often built to silence those who challenged its traditions. She spoke where others whispered, raised her voice where others trembled. When journalists sought a soundbite, Crockett gave them a spectacle. When her opponents tried to corner her, she turned the tables with a searing retort. She wore boldness like armor, and for years it worked. She became a figure who seemed untouchable, one whose confidence electrified her supporters and intimidated her adversaries. But confidence can harden into something else. With every victory, every headline that praised her courage, the line between conviction and arrogance blurred. Crockett carried herself not only as a fighter, but as someone who believed she could not lose. In televised clashes, she smirked at opponents, dismissing them with cutting one-liners designed for viral clips. In interviews, she leaned into her reputation as the disruptor, the one who would scorch the earth rather than concede ground. To some, it was thrilling. To others, it was exhausting. This lawsuit, though, was different. $80 million wasn't just a number. It was a symbol of Crockett's unyielding belief that she could raise the stakes higher than anyone dared. Her move against Karoline Leavitt was calculated to dominate the narrative, to assert her strength in a way that left no room for doubt. She expected the same playbook that had worked so often before to work again: shock, intimidate, overpower. The press would chase her quotes, the public would marvel at her audacity, and her opponent would crumble beneath the pressure. And yet, for all her bravado, there was a subtle shift in the room whenever she spoke. At first, the fire in her words captivated the audience, but as she pressed harder, layering insult upon insult, demand upon demand, a question began to ripple beneath the surface. Was this fearlessness, or was it overcompensation? Was this the confidence of a leader certain of her cause, or the arrogance of someone blinded by her own legend? Crockett leaned forward, her voice ringing with the certainty of someone convinced of victory. But the louder she spoke, the more the audience began to wonder. Was she hiding something? Karoline Leavitt's story did not begin beneath the bright lights of Washington or in the marble halls of power. It began in a small town where the grit of everyday life carved character deeper than privilege ever could. She grew up in a working-class family, the kind that measured wealth not in dollar signs but in resilience, long hours, and the pride of keeping promises even when the world seemed stacked against them. The lessons she carried weren't taught in elite universities or whispered in backroom deals. They were forged in the rhythm of sacrifice, persistence, and the quiet determination of people who knew how to fight without ever lifting their voices. From her earliest steps into politics and media, Leavitt was underestimated. Colleagues dismissed her as too young, too inexperienced, too ordinary to command attention in an arena dominated by seasoned power brokers. When she stepped into debates, the smirks came first, the subtle glances that said, "She doesn't belong here." When she offered her analysis on television panels, there were interruptions, condescension, attempts to wave her aside. The message was clear: sit down, wait your turn, let the seasoned voices speak. But she didn't sit down. She sharpened her arguments until they were impossible to ignore. She studied harder, spoke clearer, and carried herself with the composure of someone who knew storms don't have to be matched with thunder. They can be endured with stillness. Each dismissal became fuel. Each doubt became a stepping stone. Slowly, she transformed from an overlooked newcomer into a voice that couldn't be muted. Her struggles carved an empathy into her that made her distinct. She understood what it meant to be brushed aside, to be told you're not enough, to have your place questioned before you even open your mouth. It connected her to those in America who carried the same scars. The Immies, grandmother juggling 3 jobs, the first-generation student told their dreams were too big, the worker whose accent or background became an excuse to deny them respect. Leavitt became more than a political figure. She became a quiet emblem of dignity in a culture that too often confuses arrogance with strength. That composure earned her both admiration and criticism. Admirers called her steady, unshakable, someone who embodied a kind of courage rarely seen in the chaos of modern politics. Critics accused her of lacking fire, of being too restrained, too unwilling to throw the kind of verbal punches that capture headlines. Yet Leavitt understood something her rivals often forgot. The strongest storms don't roar, they endure, and in enduring, they outlast. It was precisely that stillness, that calm resilience, that prepared her for this moment. Facing an $80 million lawsuit designed to rattle her confidence and shatter her credibility, she carried into the chamber every scar, every insult, every moment of being underestimated. They were no longer burdens. They were armor. The cameras may have seen only a composed face and steady eyes, but beneath that quiet surface was the weight of years of struggle, a lifetime of being told she couldn't, and the defiance of proving again and again that she could. And now, face to face with a lawsuit meant to crush her, the world would see if she could rise. Jasmine Crockett wasted no time striking. Her words came like whiplash, each sentence sharp enough to slice through the charged silence of the chamber. She repeated the figure, $80 million, again and again, letting it echo like a verdict already written. Her tone was blistering, her delivery designed not just to state a claim, but to scorch the ground beneath her opponent's feet. She leaned into the microphone, her voice rising, daring Karoline Leavitt to respond, daring the crowd to imagine her defeated under the crushing weight of numbers too large to fathom. Gasps fluttered across the room. Reporters scribbled faster, their pens racing to keep up with the storm unraveling before them. The audience shifted uneasily in their seats, the murmurs growing louder with each strike. It was a performance, and Crockett knew it. Every syllable was calibrated for maximum spectacle, every pause crafted to amplify the drama. She wanted the cameras to capture not just her fire, but the supposed unraveling of her opponent. But Leavitt didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt, didn't roll her eyes, didn't bite back. She sat still, steady as stone, letting the storm rage without showing a single crack in her resolve. Her hands folded neatly before her, her gaze locked, unblinking. For every barb hurled her way, her silence seemed to grow heavier, drawing the audience's eyes away from Crockett's fury and back to her composure. The tension climbed higher, each word from Crockett striking like thunder. The room braced for Leavitt to break, to lash out, to stumble under the weight of $80 million. Everyone thought Leavitt would crumble under the weight, but instead, she leaned forward, Karoline Leavitt leaned forward, and the energy in the room shifted instantly. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone was measured, steady, cutting through the chamber like a blade wrapped in silk. Where Crockett had shouted, Leavitt whispered. Where Crockett had thrown fire, Leavitt delivered ice. $80 million, she began, her words deliberate, each syllable landing with weight. A murmur rippled across the audience. She paused, letting the number hover in the air like smoke. Then she continued. Not 80 million in truth, not 80 million in justice, 80 million in theater. The crowd stirred. Reporters lifted their heads, pens freezing mid-sentence. The rhythm of her speech carried its own pulse. Pause, proof, punchline. She pointed to the claim itself, peeling it apart piece by piece, exposing contradictions and exaggerations hidden beneath Crockett's performance. Each fact she laid down was like a brick, slowly building a wall that her opponent could not climb. Crockett shifted in her seat, her earlier fire dimming into something closer to discomfort. Her hands, once animated, gripped her papers tighter. Leavitt pressed on, weaving logic with restraint, confidence without arrogance. She dismantled the $80 million figure with surgical precision, showing how it was less about damages and more about dominance. Each revelation pulled another gasp from the audience. Numbers can intimidate, she said quietly, her voice almost intimate. But they cannot erase the truth, and the truth is simple. This lawsuit is not about money. It is about silencing a voice that was never supposed to speak. A wave of silence crashed over the room. Crockett's expression flickered, the certainty she had worn like armor suddenly cracking beneath the weight of her rival's composure. Leavitt let the silence breathe. She didn't rush to fill it. She allowed the stillness to hang heavy, forcing every listener to confront the contrast between the storm they had just witnessed and the calm authority now commanding the room. Then, with a final devastating cadence, she concluded, if dignity can be priced at $80 million, then maybe this lawsuit was never about me. Maybe it was about proving that arrogance costs more than anyone can afford. The room erupted, not with cheers, but with stunned silence that felt louder than applause. Reporters exchanged wide-eyed glances, Supporters sat frozen, their breath caught between disbelief and awe. Even Leavitt's harshest critics found their words stolen by the gravity of what they had just witnessed. By the time she finished, even her harshest critics sat frozen in disbelief. The silence that followed Karoline Leavitt's words did not stay trapped within the walls of that chamber. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Clips of the moment flooded social media. The pause after her final sentence replayed again and again, slowed down, captioned, remixed. On TikTok, the hashtag #SilentRoom surged to the top of the trending list, stitched into edits where the background cut to black just as the audience froze. On Twitter, memes sprang up overnight, painting Crockett as rattled, outmaneuvered, while Leavitt's stillness became the symbol of composure under fire. Comment sections roared with validation. "This is what dignity looks like." She didn't just speak, she owned the room. Crockett thought she could bury her, but she buried the lawsuit instead. The language was fiery, celebratory, almost cinematic, as if millions of viewers had just witnessed a climactic scene in a drama they couldn't stop watching. By the next morning, cable news ran the clip on repeat. Commentators dissected every pause, every word choice, every flicker of expression between the two women. Influencers weighed in, posting breakdowns of the exchange with captions like, "This is how you win without shouting." Even late-night comedy shows couldn't resist, turning Crockett's faltering reactions into punchlines, while elevating Leavitt's calm as the ultimate mic drop. The ripple effect was undeniable. Crockett, once praised for her fire, now faced a backlash she hadn't anticipated. Critics accused her of overreaching, of weaponizing spectacle only to be undone by her own arrogance. Supporters scrambled to reframe the narrative, but the tide was turning faster than anyone expected. Meanwhile, Leavitt, who entered the chamber fighting for survival, emerged with momentum she hadn't imagined possible. Her composure became not just a defense but a rallying cry, a reminder to Countless viewers that calm courage could still triumph in a world addicted to chaos. The battle had spilled far beyond the chamber. It was no longer just a lawsuit. It was a cultural moment, one that shaped reputations in real time. And yet, as the headlines mounted and the hashtags grew louder, something deeper loomed just beyond the screen. But outside the courtroom of public opinion, the consequences cut even deeper. When the noise of headlines and hashtags began to fade, Karoline Leavitt returned to the heart of the matter. She stood before the microphones, her voice calm, but carrying a weight that no dollar figure could eclipse. "This isn't about $80 million, she said, her eyes steady. "It's about truth. It's about dignity. It's about the courage to stand when others want you silent." Her words landed with a resonance that reached far beyond politics. To many, they cut to something universal. The understanding that principles will always outweigh money, that service to something larger than oneself will always rise above ego. Leavitt reminded her listeners that lawsuits may come and go, careers may rise and fall, but character, tested in the fire of public scrutiny, endures. She framed her own struggle as part of a larger American story, the story of people who refuse to be broken by arrogance or silenced by power. "This nation was built," she continued, "by those who believed fairness could triumph over force and resilience could outlast intimidation. That's not just history, it's who we are." In that moment, her voice became more than defense. It became affirmation. Listeners didn't just hear a rebuttal to Crockett. They heard their own stories echoed back. The worker who refuses to be disrespected, the immigrant who refuses to be erased, the dreamer who refuses to be told their place. Leavitt closed not with fire, but with resolve. Dignity is not for sale, and it will always triumph. The words rose like a crescendo, simple but unforgettable. In the end, it wasn't the lawsuit or the headlines that defined the moment. It was the triumph of dignity over arrogance, a reminder that truth, once spoken with courage, cannot be silenced. Karoline Leavitt may have entered that room begging for the lawsuit to be dropped, but what she delivered instead was far more powerful, a masterclass in dignity. In the face of an $80 million weapon meant to break her, she chose composure over chaos, courage over fear. And the result was a moment that silenced even her harshest critics. The moral is clear. Arrogance fades, but courage endures. No matter how loud the attacks, no matter how heavy the odds, truth has a way of standing taller than spectacle. Leavitt's calm defiance reminded America that strength isn't always about shouting the loudest. It's about refusing to bow when the world expects you to fall. And now, the question isn't just what happens to this lawsuit, it's what happens next in the fight for dignity, fairness, and truth in our public life. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel, share this video, and join the community that refuses to look away when history unfolds in real time. Together, we can stand on the side of truth and ensure that dignity continues to triumph where arrogance tries to reign.